Ja, bene. Good morning, my relatives. This is Mark Charles. It is Wednesday, June 16th, and I'm sitting down for my second cup of coffee. I've been nursing it for a while as I've been thinking about stuff I want to talk about this morning. But before I begin, let me do as I always do by acknowledging that I'm speaking to you from Washington, D.C., and these are the lands of the Piscataway. And I want to thank the Piscataway for their stewardship of these lands. And I want to humbly state how honored I am to be living on these lands today. So, my Piscataway relatives, thank you for being the host people of these lands. Um, if you've been paying attention to the news, there's several things going on. And the first thing I just want to mention is that our nation has crossed the 600,000 death mark to COVID-19. This happened just this past week. And while it is very good news that our numbers are going down, 600,000 deaths is still a very, very large number. And so I want to, again, just remind people as we begin coming out of this pandemic and as things begin opening up more, that we need to make sure we're taking good time to grieve. We need to make sure that we are kind of walking into this new reality with our eyes wide open. And right, we're aware of these things, right? There's loved ones who passed away during the pandemic while we were all in lockdown, and we didn't have a good chance to say goodbye. We didn't have a good chance to communicate with them. And now they're gone, and things are going back to, I don't know if I want to say normal, but they're going back to some of the way it used to be. But there's all these relationships that are gone. And having gone through the death of a loved one myself, my brother who passed away when I was in high school, I just want to remind everyone that we have to acknowledge the loss and the sorrow and the grief, and make sure that we mourn that properly, especially as we move back into a more faster pace of life and getting things back to the way they used to be. So yeah, I want to acknowledge, and especially if you haven't lost anyone, or even if you have, but if you have friends and relatives and people around you who have lost people who are close to them, please be aware of that and reach out to those around you, reach out to your loved ones. With 600,000 deaths in our nation, I would dare say that most everyone knows someone personally who passed away or who maybe lost someone during this pandemic. And so my heart mourns with our nation and our world. Not only has it been bad here in the US, but around the globe. And I just want to remind our people to make sure we take time to grieve this properly. The second thing I want to talk about is there. Joe Biden's on his second or his first international trip. President Biden's on his first international trip. He met first with the G7, the seven, I guess, richest democracies in the world, and then he met with NATO, and he met with Queen Elizabeth, and today he's meeting with President Putin from Russia. And again, he's going back to normal, right? He arrived in Europe and he announced America's back. There's been kind of this celebration. But again, if you look at the group of people he's been meeting with, the G7 and the NATO allies, right? Almost all of these leaders are white, and most of them are male. And so, not that Donald Trump changed any of those things either. He was very white and male as well. But we have to remember, right? This is who we are as a nation. And these are who our allies are. And our allies, most of our allies, are colonial nations. And so because of that, there's a lot of things that don't come up, right? There's been a lot of questions. His upcoming meeting with President Putin from Russia. And Russia is an adversary of the U.S., and so there's a lot of challenges there, and Joe Biden is trying to make sure he comes off as a strong leader, and so he's raising issues. that have been going on with Russia, whether it's interference with our elections or whether it's the cyber warfare that's been going on. He's also, been thinking about and talking about opposition leader and Putin critic Alexei Navalny, who was both poisoned and imprisoned, and kind of the human rights abuses there. And what's fascinating about this, right, is as we're having all this focus on Russia's human rights abuses and their trying to disrupt democracy, we're not having any of these conversations with our allies, and we're not having any of these conversations acknowledging that this is actually what we're doing ourselves, right? I mean, reports just came out that the Trump administration was subpoenaing metadata from senators and their families during his presidency, right? We are still mourning the lynching of George Floyd and the shooting of Jacob Blake and many of these other police violence going on here in the U.S. We have mass shootings almost daily in this country. We have fierce opposition to voting rights and to third-party candidate and independent rights in this country. And then even in the midst of this, right, just last week or a few weeks ago, the number of remains of children's bodies found in Canada from being murdered or killed at residential boarding schools, Indian boarding schools. And what is most astonishing to me is I didn't hear any of this in the news. And especially when Joe Biden met with Queen Elizabeth, right? Because Canada didn't actually gain their full independence from the UK until 1981 or 82. Meaning the Crown was technically responsible for these boarding schools, for what was going on in Canada. And everyone meets with Queen Elizabeth and talks about how great it is. And she's just this wonderful old lady. And Joe Biden said he reminded her of his mother, which I thought was interesting because they're both pretty old. But, right. But no one's talking about she is the queen of a monarchy that for the past several hundred years wreaked devastation on communities of color around the globe. And so why there's talk about, well, we have to talk to the Catholic Church. And yes, we do have to talk to the Catholic Church, but we also have to talk to Queen Elizabeth, right? We have to talk to our NATO allies. Many of these nations were nations that set up these systems through the doctrine of discovery. And so the G7 gets together and the NATO allies get together and they're like, okay, we're a bunch of white leaders and we're so great and we're advocating for democracy and we're doing all these great things. And no one is freaking looking back even just a few decades ago. They're calling out Putin, which they should be, but they have no understanding of what they have done and even are currently doing. And the injustices, the racial violence, the white supremacy, the racism, the sexism that's embedded not only in the US, but in most of these colonial NATO nations. And this is the problem with continuing to elect white landowning men or even leaders from the two-party system, because they are not going to have the courage to confront these things, right? We see that. So Joe Biden can't question Queen Elizabeth about her nation's role in establishing boarding schools and using the doctrine of discovery. Why? Because he doesn't acknowledge it himself. He acknowledges the genocide in Armenia, not the genocide that took place here in the US. And this is the challenge we face. This is what's problematic about continuing to elect white landowning men and then sending them off to do foreign policy. Because they have no integrity to honestly look at who we are as a nation so we can actually put a honest foot forward in the globe. We see this even with there's celebrations about Juneteenth. And that took one step closer to becoming a national holiday. The Senate passed a bill that would establish Juneteenth as the end of slavery and a national holiday. This is typically celebrated within the African American community. It started in Texas in 1865, when Texas became the last state to abolish slavery. And it has been celebrated again within African American communities for over 100 years. It's been growing, increasingly being celebrated nationally. Now, it's a good thing that we're acknowledging this date. But to honor Juneteenth as the end of slavery, there's a bit of self-deception there, right? Because we haven't abolished slavery. It's still legal. The Emancipation Proclamation didn't abolish slavery. It redefined and codified it under the jurisdiction of the criminal justice system. And so it's problematic that we're writing bills now that Juneteenth marks the end of slavery when slavery is still going on through our criminal justice system. Chattel slavery has ended. The practice of slavery and taking away the civil rights of people of color has not ended. In fact, it's been protected in the Constitution now. This is what is so bizarre about all these things, is our nation celebrates these things. Now, I fully understand why the African American community celebrates this day, because that was the end of chattel slavery, and it was the end of the Texas was the last state to finally give up that vile practice. And I completely understand why there is celebration within the African American community. But if we're going to celebrate this nationally, we have to be honest about it, which is we haven't actually abolished slavery. It's still legal. So let's not give the white landowning men who run our Senate and our House too much credit, because they haven't finished their work yet. And let's stop being satisfied with baby steps. This is the same thing coming up with the 4th of July, right? The 4th of July is a month away, not even less than a month away. We celebrate our independence. We celebrate this value of our nation, that we hold these truths, that all men are created equal. But we have to acknowledge, when they said all men are created equal, they already meant all white landowning men from the 1%. That's what they were talking about. White men. Natives are referred to in the Declaration of Independence as savages. African Americans were not included. They were actually enslaved at that point. Women were intentionally left out. And yet we celebrate it as if we have this founding document that advocates for the equality of everybody, but it doesn't. And this is the problem. We don't acknowledge what we're standing on, what we've done, and the incredible amount of work we have to do yet. We keep celebrating these baby steps that white landowning men take, instead of saying, why are we celebrating this? Right? It's 2021. We need to just acknowledge that it's despicable that we haven't gotten to this point yet. The reason the road to equality is such a long road is not because people of color have a hard time understanding our humanity. It's because white landowning men don't want to give up their position of power. That's why the road to equality is a long road. We understand our humanity. We understand our own agency. We absolutely get that. It's that the people in charge, the white landowning men, don't want to give it up. So they want to celebrate all these little baby steps they're taking along the way, instead of just letting us say, get over yourselves. It's 2021. Get with the program. Let's actually abolish slavery. Let's stop celebrating this dehumanizing document known as the Declaration of Independence. Let's actually have some real honest conversation with our NATO allies. And let's be honest with our adversaries that we're actually not much different than they are. These are the things that we need to do as a nation. These are the things that neither Donald Trump nor Joe Biden are willing to do. And these are the things our nation won't even let leaders of color do if they come up through the two-party system, right? President Obama tried to talk more honestly and was chastised by both Democrats and Republicans. Vice President Harris learned a lesson from watching President Obama, so she's not even going there, right? She's going out to Guatemala and telling people, don't come, don't come. We don't want you here. That's the problem with our two-party system. It's rooted in racism, sexism, and white supremacy, and it trains the leaders who come up through that system to parrot white landowning men. This is why we need foundational level change. And this is why we have to stop congratulating white landowning men for the baby steps that they take. We have to be honest with them. Get over yourselves. Let's make some real progress here. Let's have some real conversation. Let's stop celebrating things that actually aren't even true. Or at least let's acknowledge what we're celebrating. We're celebrating on Juneteenth the end of chattel slavery. We are not celebrating the abolishment of slavery. Slavery is still legal. Let's have a real, honest conversation with Queen Elizabeth instead of just being so flustered that we get to be in her presence. Let's create a common memory. Let's demand that of our leaders. And if they can't do that, let's elect leaders who are able to do that. These are the thoughts that I've been having as I've been watching, especially as I've been watching President Biden in his first trip overseas. And we have a long way to go. We have much work to do. I want to thank everyone who's been helping move some of this stuff along. But we have a long way to go. These are my thoughts today. I'm actually going to be doing another of my On Selling Truth book studies on Friday in the afternoon. And if you have questions, we're going to be going over chapter 4 this week. And so if you have questions about that, please feel free to share those on my social media, and I'll try to pick those up and answer as many as I can during that time. And I've been doing the sunrises this morning as well. We did one yesterday morning as well as this morning. And I'm hoping to do another one, if not tomorrow, maybe on Friday. It's pretty early getting up in the morning. I have to get up about 4:40 in the morning to get to about 4:50 to get to the river to watch the sunrise. And so I can't do it every morning. But yeah, I'm trying to do it several mornings a week, and I'll hopefully do it, if not tomorrow morning, again on Friday morning. It's supposed to be clear for the next few days. For our relatives who are on the West Coast and in the Midwest and Southwest, you're in our prayers. I see this massive heat wave, as well as the ongoing drought and wildfires that are going and burning. Please keep yourself safe. Make sure that you stay cool and be wise when you go outdoors in this very extremely hot weather right now. But I hope everyone has a good day. There's a lot going on. Thank you for joining me for my second cup of coffee. I love these chances to sit down and talk with you. And I'll look forward to touching base again later this week. I can't have my relatives and Hakonet.